chin and looked up. Me. A trainer of. She looked down and gestured dismissively at Psyduck. Of course not. She then frowned. Psyduck showed up a short time ago and it has been wandering around this compound ever since. I have fed it and that is all. But enough small talk. She then pointed at Ash. Let us have a battle and I will see how worthy you are. He quirked an eyebrow at her. So you're the gym leader then? I thought it was someone named Koga. The stern-looking Kunoichi narrowed her eyes. My name is Aya and I am the Fuchsia gym leader. Now are you here to battle, or talk? Even though there was confusion since all of them had been almost certain that the Fuchsia gym leader had been a man named Koga, Ash nodded nonetheless. Alright, whenever you're ready, so am I. Soon enough, Ash and the gym leader known as Aya were standing across from each other on the hardwood, dojo floor. Smirking, she made a snapping gesture with her hand to her side that was fast. So fast in fact, the movement was almost a blur until the hand came back to rest in front of her face, a Pokeball now in it as she poised both hands in front of her. Now, prepare to face the fear of the ninja. She then made an exaggerated motion before swinging around and releasing the ball in her hand. Coughing, writhed in the clouds of deception. As the ball snapped open and the meteor-shaped, living rock of poison appeared floating above the floor, Ash narrowed his eyes. Here we go. He then made his own selection. Grabbing and enlarging a Pokeball before holding it out. This is it. Grimer, I choose you. As the oversized mass of living sludge appeared with arms raised and a girthy growl emanating from within, Ash had to immediately hit a wide stance and hold his arms out when his Pokemon turned to him. No, Grimer. No. He said sternly but not unkindly as he kept his arms extended to the amorphous blob of sludge. Of which had turned to him and appeared ready to lunge for a backbreaking hug. After the match. Okay. Remember what we talked about. Ash appeared nervous since he knew he couldn't stop Grimer if he really wanted to hug him. But, he was hoping to Arceus herself, that their last little conversation about boundaries went heated and he didn't wind up buried beneath a mass of sludge. Luckily for him, Grimer seemed to listen and obey his wishes as he smiled. Grimer. That caused Ash to smile in relief as his Pokemon faced forward again to prepare for battle. Thank goodness, dodge the stink there. The two battlers stared each other down for a short time, though neither made to initiate the first move. It was as if they were sizing one another up, preparing themselves for the impending match ahead. In the meantime, Misty blinked a few times in confusion. I wonder why Ash is using Grimer for this match and not one of the three that he's been working with just for this gym battle. Giselle shook her head. I don't know. Maybe he changed his mind. But I do find it kind of weird that he entrusted one of their Pokeballs to me this morning, right after sending Eevee off so he could have all the Pokemon he wanted with him today. Plus Pikachu of course. Finally though, talk had run its course and, as if the invisible bell had been rung, Aya made the first move. Coughing use clear smog. Coughing. From the craters in its body, Coughing released a thick white smoke that billowed out across the dojo and settled over it like a curtain of fog on a rainy mountaintop. Ash, used to such tactics by now, tensed himself up for action while Grimer did the same thing. Keep an eye open, Grimer. His eyes flicked back and forth. Coughing could come from anywhere. Are you scared? Came the jeering voice of Aya a short time later. This is how a ninja battles. In the cloak of deception do we stalk our prey before we finally strike. Ash looked straight into the cloud, to where her voice was coming from. Even now your senses are beginning to abandon you to the fear that wells in your heart. You know defeat is nigh but you cling to what little hope remains. Grimer, use minimize. Ash called out, blocking her voice in favor of focusing on his Pokemon. Doing as commanded, Grimer started to compress and shrink himself down so that he became less of a target in the middle of the white cloud of smoke swirling around him. All of your efforts shall be in vain. She called out just before giving another order to her Pokemon. Coughing use poison gas. Ash's eyes could only narrow in thought as he saw the white cloud begin to mix with purple as Coughing, wherever it was, began using the move it had been bidden. That's strange. He murmured to himself. Why would she have Coughing use a move like that on another poison type? It makes no sense. Now Coughing. Her voice rang out again. Use haze. Yet another layer was added to the already thick cloud of smoke and poison. Only this time, the third layer appeared in the form of a cool, light blue sheet of air. Then, within seconds, he heard. Use explosion. Not just Ash but also his friends all became shocked at Aya's choice of command. Though, never being one to remain caught off guard or flat-footed for long, Ash yelled urgently. Grimer, hurry. I want you to use minimize again and get as low to the floor as you can. And maximize your ability to harden. In the tense few seconds leading up to the inevitable eruption, Giselle leaned forward while sweating nervously at the brow. Why would she use a move like that so early in the battle? No answers came, however, because within the span of seconds, the spark was lit and immediately followed by the sound of a powerful explosion. The dojo rocked, the floor shook, and yet a fourth layer of smoke, this time a thick black one, exploded into the air as the eruption caused by coughing went off. Ash, who was still at a loss to the unorthodox and wild change of events, yelled in concern for his Pokémon. Grimer. Grimer, are you okay? As the ringing from the explosion finally died down, leaving an even more ominous cloud of icy, black, poisonous smoke in its wake, all was silent for the time. Grimer. Ash shouted again. Grimer, are you okay? Speak to me. Aya's laughter came back from the other side of the wall of smoke and haze separating them. You should not waste your breath. The dinging sound of a Pokémon being returned followed that. Coughing sacrificed itself to bring an end to the enemy, it shall not rise again. Is that why you did that? Misty shouted, Psyduck still standing near her legs. You sacrificed coughing just to beat Grimer. That was your plan all along. Aya's laughter filtered through the cloud of smoke, haze and fog. It is the way of the ninja. To make whatever sacrifices necessary to achieve victory. Ash's teeth were gritted together, but before he could call out again for Grimer, the very Pokémon in question emerged from the smoke cloud looking singed and scuffed up, but still okay. Grimer. Ash smiled brightly in relief. You're okay. This time, it was he who rushed Grimer as Ash leapt at the big ball of sludge and wrapped his arms around it. I'm so glad you're alright. I was super worried. Happy to receive a hug from his trainer, Grimer I smiled and returned the embrace. Practically smothering Ash in his stinky folds while Aya, on her side of the dojo, widened her eyes. It made it. How can this be? Her eyes then narrowed in frustration. Perhaps there is more to this boy and his Pokémon than I earlier anticipated. After managing to get free from Grimer's crushing embrace, Ash smiled up at his Pokémon, not even thinking about the smell now on his clothes. I'm so glad you're safe. Great job listening to me, by the way, I know that's what saved you. Basking in his trainer's praise, Grimer nodded and I smiled again while looking down at Pikachu as the little electric type extended his fist up to the larger Pokémon. Pikachu pie. Grime. He responded back to his much smaller teammate, as if accepting Pikachu's praise through Pokespeech. Very well. Aya's voice was calmer and more serious now. You may have gotten lucky in that last battle, but the last part of Coughing's sacrifice is still in effect. He didn't understand what she meant at the last part, but Ash had a feeling the fight was about to get a lot harder. And he was right too when she said after a few moments of silence. Let us see how you can battle against something you cannot see nor know. Ash soon heard the distinguishable sound of a Pokeball snapping open, but Aya never gave the identity of her second Pokemon. So, that's how she wants it then, huh? He murmured to himself. Fine, two can play at that game. The boy then looked to Grimer. I know you could probably keep going, and I'm sorry you basically got cheated out of that last battle, but this isn't an ordinary opponent, Grimer. I need to fight her in a different way, fire for fire. His Pokémon nodded in understanding and allowed Ash to return him before the young and talented trainer chose his next combatant. Alright. He spoke to himself in a whisper again. I don't know who she's chosen to battle, so I'm basically flying blind right now, but I think this should work. Arceus willing. Ash then raised the Pokeball up. Don't make any sounds, bud, now let's do this. As he released his second Pokemon, Magnemite obeyed the command while still in its ball and didn't announce itself. Not even as the dual-type Pokémon materialized inside of the multi-layered smoke cloud and started the battle while immediately fighting blind. In a very unique change of tactics, where neither trainer knew exactly who or what they were battling, the tension was both high and filled with mystery. Like being poised on the edge of some fascinating discovery but not knowing exactly what awaited you. This is strange. Giselle commented. I don't know who either of them chose to battle and I still don't get why Aya had coughing blow up like that so soon into the match. Just be thankful Ash had Grimer do what he did before that explosion or both of them would have been taken down. Misty looked at the brunette. Remember all that stuff we went through on the way here? I wouldn't be surprised if she battles exactly the way she guards her home. Brock nodded. That's right. That last tactic may not have made any sense but I'm sure she had a reason behind it. After all, she still has an advantage and Ash is at a disadvantage. He nodded at the thick, visibility-shattering cloud that suffused the dojo. Ash and whoever he chose still can't see to battle clearly and on top of that, they don't even know who they're fighting. But I'm sure Aya has trained her Pokémon for these very scenarios and most likely, that coughing thing was probably the normal. The two girls looked ahead just as the gym leader's voice rang out like an invisible siren call. Use Poison Sting. Inside of the smoke cloud, Magnemite had to quickly swerve in order to dodge a flying barrage of poisonous needles that were fired at it. Though, Ash's Pokémon no more than drifted away before yet another burst of needles were sent hurtling its way. Magnemite was soon forced to begin levitating up, to the side, down and in as many different angles as it could to avoid the seamlessly endless barrage of poisonous needles aimed for it. Hearing what was going on, Ash helped out his endangered Pokémon by yelling. Use Thunder Shock and try to make it as widespread as you can. Dropping down quickly to avoid another hail of needles, Magnemite twisted around before releasing itself into a spin. A spin in which started firing rapid bolts of electricity out into the expansive cloud of smoke, hoping that one might get lucky and hit their opponent. As Magnemite did this and kept charging and firing each bolt of lightning from the bolt atop its head, the electric, steel-type Pokémon made sure not to announce its name at any point and give away its identity. Something Magnemite was rather sure, from Ash's earlier command, that he didn't want. If anyone could have seen Aya's face though, they would have known she wasn't worried as she smirked. You can fight without sight my friend, in the shadows. Find it and then use Wrap. When Ash heard that command, he knew right then that he was dealing with a specific type of Pokémon since only certain species could use Wrap. But even then, the list of potential suspects was still rather lengthy and he was no closer to figuring it out. Instead, all he could do was call out. Watch out for it. Don't let yourself get caught. Unfortunately, Aya's Pokémon had a very good sense of feel and its ability to detect body heat came in unfortunate handy during moments like this. Unfortunate for Magnemite, that was. Even though it was a metallic Pokémon with no heat to give off biologically, electricity created heat and since Magnemite was still using Thunder Shock in an attempt to hit its opponent, the slippery enemy in question was able to lock onto its prey. Moving at a fast, lithe and agile clip, the long-bodied Pokémon used the muscles in its body to jump off the ground and straight at Magnemite. Using only sense and feel to find it. Taken off guard, Magnemite felt itself suddenly being constricted and wrapped up tightly as if a lasso had been looped around it. Smirking as she heard the telltale signs of a successful wrap, Aya called once more. Now use Glare. Magnemite, even in its struggles, soon had to stop as it found itself staring straight into the glowing yellow eyes of a chilling-looking face. Immediately, Magnemite locked up and became paralyzed in fear as Aya gave another command, as if sensing each thing that was happening. Now use Bite. Tightly controlling its opponent with a firm hold, the stealthy and sneaky Pokémon reared back and then lunged forward, opening its mouth wide and striking Magnemite with nasty fangs each time. Even though metallic and not of flesh, the grazing of such sharp teeth digging into its metal plating was still painful and Magnemite couldn't escape. All it could do was float in place and endure as its opponent struck it again and again and again. Each time making a loud grating sound as teeth struck metal. Ash couldn't bear to stand aside and listen to his Pokémon get brutally mauled by whatever they were fighting but Aya wasn't about to give a reprieve. Now use Toxic. Well, Arceus could be praised for miracles because Aya also didn't know what Ash's Pokémon was. Which thereby meant that she also didn't know Magnemite was a steel type. Even still, Ash never liked to rely upon type advantages or disadvantages alone, so he started to think up a plan. As Aya's mystery battler ended up shooting a poisonous, goopy mess of toxic waste into Magnemite's face, it luckily had no effect and it gave Ash a moment to think while murmuring to himself. I have to get that smoke covering gone. He then panned his eyes over the windows lined all the way down the dojo on both sides of the room. And in that very same moment, an idea finally hit. Hey! If you can hear me, buddy, then I want you to use Sonic Boom. Build up the sound waves in your body for as long as you can and then release them like an explosion. This actually surprised Aya, by the look on her face, but mostly since she had just realized that whatever Ash's Pokémon was, it apparently wasn't a type susceptible to poison if he felt confident to give it such a command. The second reason, naturally, was the command itself, but she knew that she couldn't stop it since she couldn't even see what was going on. In the cloud of smoke though, while still wrapped up and constrained by its opponent, Magnemite began spinning in fast circles. The more it spun, the faster it went, and as the electric type's rotational speed increased, the Pokémon wrapped around it started to become dizzy and increasingly disoriented. As Magnemite spun, it focused on building up sound waves and focusing them into the magnets on both sides of its body. Then, once the sonic energy inside of its metallic form became so powerful that Magnemite began to literally vibrate and shake, the time for release had come. Now spinning so fast that the Pokémon constricting it had dizzy swirls in its eyes, the purple poison-coated Magnemite ascended up into the air, almost to the ceiling, before letting the stored-up sound waves go. When it finally did, the resulting boom was almost painful to the ears and could be felt even inside of the chest cavity of everyone present. The shockwave that resulted from the unleashed sound waves were so powerful, they were actually visible. To everyone standing outside of the plume of thick, combined gases that both battling Pokémon were trapped within, the sound shockwave acted like a repulsing force field that spread out in all directions. Since glass was so sensitive to sound waves, all the windows in the dojo battle room instantly shattered and created an even greater uproar of noise. That of which resembled a few dozen dishes of glass shattering all at one time. Luckily, however, everyone was far enough away from the windows above that no one was hit by the shrapnel-like shards. By the time the cacophony of ear-splitting noise finally died down, every window in the dojo, even the big, full-length ones at the very back, were all broken and the breeze from outside was already beginning to blow inside. This had the added effect of rather quickly beginning to dissipate the cloud of smoke, poison and haze that the battle was currently taking place in. As Aya watched her Pokémon's greatest weapon of concealment slowly getting sucked out through the open windows by the strong outside air, she blinked in shock and her mouth stood slightly agape. And no. No. That surprise was replaced with anger as she gritted her teeth. No. This can't be. Ash, however, was smiling from ear to ear as the hazy barrier concealing Magnemite was gradually pulled apart and dissipated by the merciful fresh air until, soon, he was finally able to see the shape of his Pokémon. Within only a few seconds more, the cloud of smoke and other hazardous pollution had completely faded until he could see Aya across the floor, in all her anger, and Magnemite in full. Not only that, but he could also now see the Pokémon that had been torturing his own for most of the battle. And Ekans, huh? The smile still didn't leave his face as he saw the still dizzy, barely hanging on serpent coiled around Magnemite. I should have known. But, oh well. His smile became a grin as he pointed his finger. Aya, let's bring you guys into the light and out of all that shadow. Magnemite used Thunderbolt. No longer concealed by smoke and with a disoriented Ekans hanging onto it, Magnemite had all the time it needed to build up the electrical power needed. The metallic Pokémon only required a few seconds to store up electricity as its hovering form began glowing and sparking with static energy. Then, with Aya only able to look on helplessly, Magnemite unleashed a powerful electrical surge as it finally announced itself to the world for the first time all battle. Magnamite. The resulting bolt of electricity that followed completely wrapped around and consumed both Magnemite and Ekans. Only to the former, it was like a pleasant lightning shower. Though, to the latter, Ekans' current plight could be equated to a familial serpent of thunder wrapping around it and giving the slippery snake Pokémon the jolt of its life. When the electrical show finally dissipated, Ekans just fell off of Magnemite like a rope that had suddenly been untied and allowed to go slack. Dropping to the ground with burn patches and electricity still crackling off of its body, Ekans merely breathed out a wisp of smoke and went still. Officially down for the count. Gritting her teeth, Aya internally seethed while Ash cheered for their victory. Yeah, Magnemite. You did it. He held his arms out as the small electric type levitated back over to him. That was so amazing. You kicked butt. Don't get cocky. The angry Kunoichi snapped after returning Ekans to its Pokeball. You may have won this round and overcome our concealment strategy, but this battle is not yet over. Ash nodded in agreement and let Magnemite float out of his arms. You're right. So let's finish this battle. Aya smirked again. Oh, we will end it. But this shall end in your defeat. She raised her last Pokeball. Now, prepare for fear. As the pretty but overconfident young woman let fly the ball in her hand, she announced the Pokemon within. Come out, my partner in the art of darkness. Venonat. Appearing from the flash of light that the Pokeball released came the small and hairy form of the insect Pokemon, Venonat, which announced itself with an echoey sounding, Venonat. Oh no. Misty lunged back, nearly tripping over Psyduck in the process. Not another bug. Brock, however, narrowed his eyes in deep concentration and contemplation. I'm starting to see a definite trend with the theme of this gym and with Aya. Giselle looked at him. What do you mean? He looked at the green-haired ninjutsu enthusiast and explained. Everything has a purpose, a very tricky and deceptive purpose in this gym. Even the thing with coughing earlier. She planned it. She just used coughing to erect those visibility barriers for the battle afterwards. Aya always planned to sacrifice it, she just hoped Grimer would get taken along with it. Misty frowned in frustration and anger. That's horrible. Using Pokemon as pawns. Brock nodded. Depending on who is judging, then yes. Other people would just see it as good strategy. Either way, Ash needs to stay on his toes. This isn't over yet. Ash, looking at Venonat closely, thought intently for a few moments before looking at Magnemite. You did good, bud, but I need to do something else for this battle. Thanks for how hard you fought, you really made me proud. Magnemite Eye smiled at him and then went back into its Pokeball as Ash returned it. Afterward, he turned his attention to choosing his last Pokemon. Okay. He looked down at the Pokeball he grabbed and held it in his hand. This is it. I know you can do this. Ash then called forth the Pokemon contained within the ball, and as it appeared in a flashing starburst of lights on the floor, it announced its arrival with a loud, Diglett. What? Misty's mouth dropped open as she saw Diglett appear from the Pokeball. No way. He's using Diglett. He just captured it yesterday. Psyduck jumped around in front of her and held its hands up. Psy. Who told you to jump in? Misty fired back with serrated fangs for teeth. Psy. The poorly confused duck just looked up at her, hands again on its head, and tilted to the side. Duck. Misty's own head dropped and she sighed. There's something wrong with that duck. Giselle just giggled. I think it's cute. Back in the middle of the battle between Ash and Aya though, the latter narrowed her eyes before drawing her arm back. Venonat used supersonic. Eyes glowing, Venonat called its name and then sent a ring of concentric energy pulses at Diglett. However, being true to form, Diglett quickly slipped beneath the earth and vanished into his tunnel, allowing the rings of confusion-inducing energy to just pass him by. Diglett used Dig. Ash commanded as the small mole Pokemon hurried under the floor toward Venonat. Just before he could come up under it though, Aya commanded. Venonat jumped back and used Disable. Hopping away just as Diglett was about to rise up beneath it, Venonat made use of its big, insectoid eyes again, and they glowed blue as soon as Diglett came up from the ground. From the moment this happened, a blue glow surrounded Diglett's now exposed form and immediately left the small Pokemon looking confused. Oh no. Giselle fretted. If that did what I think it did then. Brock nodded grimly. Diglett won't be able to use Dig to attack anymore. Aya smirked. Good. Now use confusion. Eyes glowing blue once again, Venonat chanted and caused a blue auric field to appear around Diglett, who, still confused from the use of disable, was unable to move until it was too late. Got you. The Kunoichi laughed as Ash gritted his teeth. Now Venonat, use poison powder. With Diglett firmly in its psychic hold and unable to move, the antenna atop Venonat's head started to shudder before a bright purple powder, fine as dust, was carried through the air toward Diglett. Unable to move or rescue himself, Diglett took the full spore attack head-on and almost right away, a sickly purple line appeared just over the top of his nose. Diglett. Ash called out. Hang on. You'll be okay. You can get out of this. Aya laughed again. Despair has set into your very bones. There is no more hope. She then pointed. Now Venonat. Use Psybeam. Venu. The funny-looking bug type started to chant while using confusion to still keep Diglett in place. Not. As twin beams of psychic energy went zipping across the floor towards Diglett from the other Pokemon's eyes, there was no escape and everyone knew it. From the moment the beams hit home and began assaulting Diglett, Ash clenched his fists and Pikachu cried out in support. Pika. Pikachu Pie. This is bad, Brock stated in a worry-filled tone while Misty and Giselle gasped in concern for Ash's Pokémon. Diglett wasn't well trained enough for this. In the midst of the chaos, Ash knew something had to be done. Diglett. Diglett, listen to me. You have the will and the ability to get free. Fight. Use your mental strength and fight. Get under the ground, Diglett. Do it. The beleaguered ground type started to fight as hard as he could against the psychic throes eclipsing his very being. Mustering every bit of his will, the poisoned ground mole Pokémon battled against the forces controlling him and tried to pull himself back underneath of the ground. You will not be free. Aya goaded. It is too late. You have lost. Just give into the despair. Never. Ash shouted back. Diglett, you can do it. I believe in you. Fight. Fight. Diglett continued to struggle and fight with all of his might, and as he did, his body actually began descending downward a little bit. Seeing this, Aya scowled. Venonat. Keep up the power. Do not let up. The bug and poison type Pokémon intensified the power it was exerting upon Diglett, but even still, he refused to give up. As if determined to show that he wasn't weak just because of his species, Diglett kept battling and fighting. Surprisingly enough, with that effort came results as he kept managing to lower himself a little more below ground with every passing second. As this tug of war went on, Aya actually started to grow nervous since Venonat visibly began losing ground against Diglett. Venonat, what are you doing? Don't let that little dirt rat beat you. Fight back. However, the battle of wills was well underway and it was already being won. And Diglett was proving to be the victor of their contest. Finally, with a loud shout from Ash of, Diglett fight! And one cry of sheer willpower from Diglett, the embattled ground type managed to break fully away from Venonat's control and disappeared below the floor. No! Aya yelled. You let it go. Venonat, how could you? Ash, who at this point was breathing a huge sigh of relief, smiled in satisfaction. Phew, that was close. But we still have a shot. Playing field leveled in their favor for the moment, Ash clenched both fists and grinned. We'll show you what true trickery and deception is, Aya. He then looked to the floor. Diglett, if you can hear me, do what you do best. Start tunneling. Even though he posed a confident exterior, Ash knew Diglett was not only poisoned now but also beaten up and injured. And for an untrained Pokémon, he knew how badly Diglett was probably suffering. He just hoped that his newest Pokémon had enough grit and determination to see it through to the end. The boy from Pallet Town ended up being made very proud indeed a few seconds later as the distinct sound of, Diglett dig, Diglett dig, Diglett dig, started to fill the room. At this point, Aya became nervous since she knew there was no move Venonat knew that could pull Diglett out of the ground. However, her worry abated since she remembered Venonat using Disable on Diglett to prevent the ground type from being able to attack while tunneling. Even still, something about the strange smile on Ash's face as soon as he heard Diglett's chants that showed he was digging, caused her to feel a pit of worry slowly beginning to form in her belly. That was a worry in which intensified when she heard the boy say, Diglett. Remember how you and your friends did all that stuff at the dam? Do it right now with Venonat. With Aya looking down all over the dojo floor as worry started to actually show through the mask of confidence she had been displaying all battle, Diglett dug a path under the ground. It was soon moving around beneath Venonat. Quick Venonat. Move, she ordered, though Ash only smiled since he knew it was no good. Don't you know how fast Diglett can dig? He called over to her as Venonat started to scramble across the floor in an effort to flee from the underground menace. You can have Venonat run around all day, but it can't outrun Diglett. Gritting her teeth again angrily, she retorted back. Really? We'll see about that. She then looked at her running Pokémon. Venonat used Psybeam on the floorboards. In an act of desperation, Venonat did as its trainer beckoned and started using Psybeam on the floor at random directions as it tried to somehow stop Diglett. But everyone watching knew how pointless it was. I thought Diglett was at the end of his rope, but Ash surprised me again, Brock complimented as he watched Venonat running from place to place while using the psychic-type attack as some kind of sad, hapless defense. But they've really turned the tide. Misty and Giselle nodded in agreement as Venonat suddenly stopped running and just scanned the floor with its feelers vibrating rapidly. This being a sign that it was trying to detect any movement from Diglett under the ground. All went still. No one hardly blinked, breathed or even said a word as everything became eerily quiet. Diglett was no longer making any noise of any kind and the tunneling had ceased. For Ash and Aya both, the situation was tense. For the former, a part of him was worried that maybe Diglett had passed out from his wounds and the poisoning. But for Aya, she was silently hoping that perhaps Diglett had fallen unconscious beneath the ground and that was why he had went silent. The truth became evident a few seconds later as a loud and ominous creaking started to fill the air. Venonat's feelers were immediately scanning for the source of the sound, but none presented themselves. Then, just as Aya's Pokémon went to take a step forward, the entire floor around Venonat in a large square shape suddenly collapsed downward. Almost like a sinkhole had spontaneously opened up beneath the bug-type's feet. Aya gasped in shock, but Ash, knowing what had happened, took a single step forward and swung his fist. Yes. Diglett, finish it now. Swarm Venonat and use Fury swipes. As Venonat lay stunned in the large hole that was now in the floor, sprawled amongst broken boards and the dirt beneath the foundation, a tunneling blur rocketed towards the trapped Pokémon like a torpedo in the ocean. Aya saw the speed blur moving beneath the floorboards toward Venonat, but she was too late to save her Pokémon. As she watched, another hole opened under Venonat, which it disappeared inside of. At that point, everyone watching knew that the prey had fallen helplessly into the den of the predator. For what felt like an eternal length of time, no one could see anything as the battle raged on underground. Nothing but the sounds of shrieks, cries and the noises of struggling and fighting could be heard. Eventually, after a period of time in which everything went quiet, Venonat reappeared from the hole in the floor, but it appeared more like it had been shot out. As it flew through the air, Venonat landed on the floor in front of Aya and lay still. It was covered in scratch, scuff and battle marks, much like it had been mauled, and from the look on its face, her last Pokémon was unable to continue battling. On the contrast, Diglett reappeared out of the ground a short ways away from Ash, and even though it appeared quite exhausted and beaten up, the poison also having taken its toll, the ground type was still conscious. Unlike his opponent, Diglett, Ash ran out and slid next to his Pokémon before wrapping his arms around the rectangular ground mole's head. I knew you could beat Venonat. I knew it. He went back to hugging his newest Pokémon while Diglett I smiled tiredly at him and weakly replied back. Diglett. Remembering that his Pokémon had been poisoned in battle, Ash pulled back and held up his finger. Hang on, Diglett. He then removed his pack from his shoulders and started rummaging around in his medical items pocket before pulling out a bottle of antidote and pointing it at Diglett. Here, buddy, this will help you feel better. Ash then sprayed a few pumps of the clear liquid onto him, which worked rapidly and cured the ground mole of his poison within the span of just a few seconds. There. He put the bottle away and then turned back to Diglett. Feel better. With a healthy glow restored back to his face, his victorious Pokémon nodded in affirmation. Diglett. Pikachu Pie. Pikachu walked up then and patted Diglett's head, as if he was congratulating him on his victory while smiling. Pika Pi Pikachu. Diglett looked at the electric type and nodded back. Diglett. Diglett dig, Diglett. Walking over to join them, Giselle smiled and spoke up. That was a tough match, but you guys really pulled through. Ash looked back at them and stood up. Thanks, but Diglett here was amazing. He then gestured down at the little ground type proudly. I haven't really even had a chance to train him yet, but Diglett pulled out all the stops and did something incredible. I'm super proud of him. Brock smiled down at Diglett and crossed his arms. I'll say. I thought he was really out of his league there at first, but he showed just how resilient he was and it was impressive. Misty smiled as well and nodded. Very impressive. Psyduck chose that moment to walk over to Diglett and tilt his head as he looked at the tunnel-making Pokémon. Sigh, duck. Ash chuckled. I think Psyduck is even congratulating him. Misty, however, just sweat dropped as her eyes went thin. Yeah, sure, or it's just hopelessly confused again. Ash then turned to look over at Aya, who was kneeling on the floor with Venonat's Pokeball out as she finished returning it. So, he began. I won the match. The female gym leader stood up and looked at Ash intensely for several long seconds before, eventually, her face hardened. You may have defeated me, but you shall not receive a badge. You are unworthy. At that, all of their eyes widened and a loud, what? Escaped from every mouth present. What do you mean I don't get the badge? Ash responded hotly, his temper now beginning to rise as he started to smell foul play. My Pokémon beat yours fair and square and they worked hard for that badge. Giselle nodded fiercely. It's the league rules. You have to bestow upon a challenger the official badge awarded by your gym if they defeat you. That's right. Misty was quickly turning red with rage as she stomped up in front of Ash and pointed at the oddly dressed woman. Ash beat your sadistic ass and you more than owe him that badge. She then jabbed her finger to the floor. You put the four of us through hell all the way here, and because of your suicidal little tests, we almost died. More than once. Misty shook her fist. Now you pull those twisted up panties out of your you-know-what, stop being such a sore damn loser and give Ash his badge. Or I'll put the real smackdown on your ninja ass, bitch. Aya stepped forward and stood toe-to-toe with Misty. You dare speak to me in such a way. Little girl, I was trained in the art of the shinobi and I can become the darkness itself. Do not threaten me or I will. At that, they all suddenly heard a loud, enough, and spun around to face the front of the dojo. There, standing in the mouth of one of the now shattered full-length windows, was a man. A man whom was poised as though he were a statue, arms crossed and feet together. An aura of seriousness and intensity surrounding him. The man himself appeared to be around 40 years old, or more, and was wearing a shinobi outfit very similar to Aya's. The strange newcomer had short black hair that spiked up on the end but a small tuft that hung down at his forehead. His eyebrows were bushy and pointed in an angry-looking V down toward his eyes. His face was an odd combination of strong, angular and stern. Somehow, that amalgamation worked well for his features, even with the intense and piercing dark eyes the older man possessed. He was wearing a light blue awagi that had black trim along the front sides and unlike Aya, his had long sleeves. He also wore mesh under armor but no sash. On his lower half he was wearing the same colored hakama pants and his chosen color of forearm teko was black, and they covered the back of his palms. The kyahan and tabi he had on were black and he had his hakama tucked into them. His choice of footwear, different from Aya's, was a pair of wooden getas, and to further separate his outfit from hers, the man also wore a long red cape that was tied around his throat like a neckerchief. As the man's sharp eyes surveyed the situation before him, he stepped out of the shattered windowsill and then walked smoothly, but with purpose, toward the others. As soon as she saw him, Aya dropped down to one knee and bowed her head low in respect as she spoke in a reverent tone. Brother. Huh. Misty looked between she and the equally strangely clad man. Brother. Nonetheless, the former Cerulean City gym leader stepped away from Aya and came to stand near Ash, Brock and Giselle. She did this as the stern-faced man walked up to the woman who had just called him brother, and then stopped in front of her. Aya. His tone was just as firm as his expression. What was the meaning of this? Have I not told you about doing this very thing in the past? Head still low, Aya replied back. Yes, brother, you did. And I am sorry, but I. He cut her off by sternly continuing. Then why did you do it? Why did you explicitly go against my wishes and pretend that you were the gym leader? At this, Ash and the others' eyes all slightly widened in surprise, even though Ash himself had been having his suspicions all along, but the kunoichi submissively responded in kind. I wanted to be sure that they were worthy, my brother. I wanted to be sure that they would not waste your tea. However, he merely cut her off again. I decide who is worthy to challenge this gym, Aya. Not only was it enough that you pretended to take my place, but you also made these trainers go through the lower rooms. His eyes narrowed as his tone became harsher and more angry. You know well that I retired the use of those rooms. They are too dangerous for normal travelers to traverse, and there were many injuries and near fatalities that resulted from the use of those rooms. Yet you made them go through them all the same. This is inexcusable. The man crossed his arms. I told you that the only tests our challengers needed to pass were the ones we placed outside and in the upper rooms. If they could get around those obstacles and think like ninja to do so, they would be worthy to challenge this gym. But you forced them through the gauntlet. Against my own wishes. If possible, his expression became even more stern and intense. And to further insult this gym, you posed as me and lost to this young man. What do you have to say for yourself, Aya? Head still low and a palpable aura of shame radiating off of her, the young woman in question answered in a low and still subservient manner. I have nothing to say, my brother. I have brought shame to you, to this gym and to our way of life, please forgive me. The man known to be her sibling just stared down at her for a time before speaking again. You are young, Aya, and you have much to learn. You have indeed done foolishly, but your path does not end here. I expect better of you in the future, if I'm to leave this gym in your hands someday. Relaxing her shoulders only slightly at the words of the much older-looking man, Aya bowed her head again and nodded. Yes, my brother, thank you for your words of wisdom and for your patience. I will indeed strive to do better and to atone for this shameful mistake I have committed. He nodded sternly to her words and then turned to finally face Ash and the others. When he did, in a sharp contrast to his interaction with Aya, the man bowed his head in respect with his arms down by his sides. Please, young travelers, forgive my rash younger sister's enthusiasm. She has much left to learn, and her passion for our ninjutsu creed often takes possession of her better judgment. I do hope that you were in no way harmed by the trials she forced you to undergo. The four of them looked among each other before glancing back to him as Ash, Brock and Giselle smiled, sweat dropped and held their hands out in front of them. Oh no. No, it was fine, really. Yeah, we made it through, no injuries or anything, we're all in one piece. It's fine, really. We needed the challenge. Yeah, no worries. Misty, however, merely crossed her arms and looked away as she huffed. I think you could do with a few less funhouse horror tricks. She then shifted a glare at Aya out of a single eye. And maybe a less psychotic and bitchy sister. The pink-garbed kunoichi grew a tick mark on the side of her forehead at Misty's not-so-subtle jab, but, out of respect and submission for her elder brother's presence, she held her tongue. Though she did shoot a half-glare Misty's way in return. Having heard Misty's complaint, the man turned to her and bowed again. Once more, you have my sincerest apologies for what you endured while making your way here. With Psyduck still standing beside her, the fiery orange-haired girl then pointed down at it. And that's another thing. Why do you have such weirdo Pokémon wandering the place? All this Psyduck does is stand around and stare at me. Come on, Misty, take it easy, Ash implored. Psyduck did save our lives. She looked at him and shot back. I know that, and it's not that I'm ungrateful. It's just. She slid her gaze down to the perpetually dense, oblivious-looking duck. It's so creepy the way it just stares at people, without ever blinking. Giselle and Brock facepalmed and shook their heads while Ash merely sighed and hung his own. The man in question, however, looked down at Psyduck before actually smiling and then looking back to Misty. Ah yes, I met that Psyduck at a place called Hop 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 Town, in the local Pokémon Center. Apparently, some strange hypnosis event that convinced many people they were Pokémon had just been resolved by the time I arrived. He gestured down at Psyduck. The nurse Joy there was caring for this Pokémon when I stopped by on the way home. It apparently had been suffering from chronic headaches that she was unable to cure. Even after the hypnosis incident that she originally believed to be the cause. He crossed his arms once more in front of his chest. I do not know why, but after I left and came back here to the gym, we soon discovered that this Psyduck had followed me. He does not battle, nor does he belong to either Aya, or myself. But he came and has never left, so we provide him shelter and food. I do apologize, however, if he was an added burden to you. Misty kept silent at that, but Ash spoke on the matter instead. No sir, it's fine. As I said, Psyduck actually saved our lives when we were on the way here. So we owe him a pretty big debt. The ninja-garbed man smiled and nodded again. That is good. Very good indeed to hear. He then looked down at the water type. Well done, Psyduck. The confused duck looked up at him, but Giselle spoke with a smile at that time. It's interesting you mention Hop 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 Town because we were there. We were actually the ones who helped solve that hypnosis crises they were having. He looked at the brunette as Aya finally stood up and moved to stand beside her brother. Did you? He blinked momentarily in surprise before smiling again. I see. Then perhaps that explains how you survived the gauntlet. His gaze then shifted to Ash. And how you, young man, defeated my sister. Most impressive indeed. The black-haired boy smiled and nodded. Thank you, sir. My name is Ash and this is my partner Pikachu. He gestured down at his first Pokémon, who chirped a greeting up at the man, before then pointing to Diglett. And this is one of my newest Pokémon, Diglett. He actually won us the match. The dark-eyed man looked down and nodded in an impressed manner at Diglett, whom just I smiled up at him, before Brock, Misty and Giselle introduced themselves as well. Once they were finished, the man bowed again before gesturing to himself. My name is Koga. I am the leader here of the Fuchsia City Pokémon Gym and it is an honor to meet 4 such rigorous and talented young trainers. As you all must be to have survived the gauntlet. And in your case Ash. He looked to the young man question. To defeat my sister. She can indeed be rash and too intense at times, but make no mistake, she is highly skilled as a trainer. For you to defeat her speaks of your own. Ash smiled modestly. Thank you, but please don't be so upset with her on our account. We didn't get hurt coming here and I did have a really good battle with her. She definitely is talented, she and her Pokémon. I'm thankful for the battle and experience. At that, Aya looked at Ash in surprise for a moment, as if stunned that he would speak so kindly of her after all she had done to he and his friends. However, after he looked back at her for a moment, Koga smiled and then glanced to Ash again. Well, she might not be the gym leader here, but Aya is still very skilled, as I said, and since you made it through the gauntlet and defeated her in battle, you have proven yourself worthy of the badge regardless. Ash smiled at that, but instead of replying as Koga expected, he just clenched his fist and gave the older man a determined look. I appreciate that Koga and Aya was a skilled competitor, but I came to battle the gym leader. If you will, I would like to have that honor and battle you properly for the badge. Growing more respect for the young man as he spoke, Koga uncrossed his arms and instead placed his hands on his hips. Such tenacity from someone so young. That I can respect. Very well, Ash, I accept your challenge. Aya and the others looked surprised, but the boy himself merely grinned and held a fist to his face. Alright. We're ready whenever you are. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Are you ready, Ash? Koga asked with a serious visage set upon his perpetually stern face. Standing across from the real Fuchsia City gym leader as he and Koga took to the dojo battle floor, Ash nodded with a smile on his lips. Yep. I'm ready whenever you are. The elder, shinobi-dressed man withdrew a shrunken Pokeball from inside of his Awagi and then held it up between 2 fingers. Very well. Then let the match begin. As Koga's first Pokemon appeared, Ash was somewhat surprised to see that it was another Venonat. Huh, you guys really are brother and sister. The messy-haired boy selected his own Pokeball and enlarged it. Here we go. You're up first, Ivysaur. Making his first appearance in a battle since he evolved from Bulbasaur, Ash's second grass type after Roselia appeared on the dojo floor with an intense gleam in his eyes. Ivysaur. Koga made no immediate move to command his Pokémon, so Ash went first. Ivysaur used Razor Leaf. Standing up on hind legs, the plant bulb Pokémon growled his name and then launched a salvo of razor-sharp leaves at Venonat. Use Psychic. Koga commanded calmly as his Pokémon's compound eyes glowed for a moment, within mere seconds of the command being given. In all actuality, it was like a seamless transition between command and execution. Veno Nat. Came the simple reply as Ivysaur's leaves were stopped cold in the air and became enshrouded in blue psychic energy before they were turned around, in midair, and sent hurtling back at their originator. Ivysaur, get out of the way and use Vine Whip. Ash commanded. The quadruped grass type made light on his feet and jumped out of the way of the leaves that Venonat sent swarming back at him. Though as soon as he landed, Ivysaur glowered and then sent two fast vines rocketing out of his partially bloomed bulb. To the amazement of everyone watching, however, Venonat didn't use a particular counter move to return fire. Instead, the bug poison type just jumped lithely to the side with an impressive show of agility and speed. A quality most obscure indeed amongst members of the same species. Good. Now use Psybeam. A wave of twin psychic energy flowed quickly out of Venonat's eyes, like a shot from a cannon, and sped across the short distance separating it from Ivysaur. He was quick to dodge though, and Ivysaur proved it by waiting until they were right upon him before jumping away and using his vines to propel himself farther away from the psychic beams. Use Takedown. Ash ordered, desiring to keep the momentum going. Ivy. He started charging Venonat, whole body tilted into his run as he did. Soar. Just then though, Koga called out, Venonat used Zen Headbutt. Venonat lowered its head and then began charging at Ivysaur as its head began glowing a deep, light blue. However, just before they could hit, Ash's Pokémon suddenly fainted to the side while whipping one of his vines out. Not expecting that, Venonat ended up getting clobbered across the body and sent rolling across the floor. Gaining further ground, Ivysaur rooted himself and then stood up before stomping himself back to the floor as a flurry of leaves went flying at the insect Pokémon.